discussion, as was mentioned, is really about exploring how agroecology and soil health, and we know soil health is important to agroecology, can really be a thread to the road to COP17. And that we really need these integrated solutions. We know even at the climate COPs, 4 years ago, there was one food pavilion. Next year, there were 2. Then there were 4. Now we've combined them into the action on food because food systems can be part of the solution. And the reason why we're here is because this is the reality. 40% of the Earth's surface is degraded. And this negatively impacts 3.2 billion people. And I show this photo from Zambezi, from Zambia, that we took on a vacation. Soil erosion is so prevalent, and it's the most prevalent form of soil degradation. And that means business as usual is not an option. In fact, it never was an option. It never should have been an option. So we must have increased stakeholder action to support implementation, monitoring, policy coherence, and financing. I'm glad we have some private sector representatives here to guide us on that, on soil health and agroecological approaches. When you think of healthy soil, what do you think of? Worms? Yeah, biological activity. Anyone else? So there's many definitions out there, and this is the definition that really speaks to me. It's about healthy soil as the ability of soil to sustain productivity, which we all recognize and acknowledge. We need productivity, we need nutritious food. But I like it because it also talks about biodiversity and environmental services, because soil is absolutely key for ecosystem restoration. You've all heard of the Great Green Wall? Yeah. We cannot plant trees in degraded soil. We need to build the soil health and have that relationship with trees. It's also a climate solution. Soil is the 3rd largest sink for carbon. It can contribute to mitigation and adaptation. It's also the most biodiverse ecosystem in the world. It is thought that we literally only know about 25% of the soil biology that exists. And it provides food and nutrition security. So the Coalition of Action, which if you're not a member, please join. I'm sure we have a lot of synergies across our members. We have 4 goals. One is to integrate soil health into policy, not just agriculture policy, but why isn't soil health in the nationally determined contribution? Is soil health in the national NDSAPs, right, for biodiversity? There's a real opportunity there. We also need to still fill those key research gaps, those key knowledge gaps that plague us all. Like, what is the impact of land management on soil health? And then obviously we want to scale the number of hectares under healthy soil practices. And then actually this number came from Tom Williams at WBCSD, that is realistic to increase investments 5 to 10-fold in soil health. So we can just blame him for that number, right, Emily? So one of the aspects is that there's a real need to generate and leverage data. We heard actually some of the ministers and some representatives across these 2 days talk about data. But for me, data is not enough, even though that's what my specialty is in monitoring. But it's how do we leverage these data to actually influence policy and practice? And I think in terms of soil health and rangelands for COP17, we have a real opportunity to demonstrate and show some of the soil health data in rangelands. So that's a key aspect of what I think the Coalition of Action can do. For example, who here loves grasses? I love grasses. I love grasses. So what is the link between grass, diversity, and productivity in soil health? So this is something we can present next year and close some of those gaps. So my final slide, we had 47 events with 70 partners at UNCCD COP16. And I really hope that we can brainstorm today of how to have greater impact, show that thread to COP18 and implementation. So with that, I'm so excited for Oliver to tell us a little bit about the link, how we link.
And that's why we work together as partners, because soil health is a principle of agroecology. As you know, 13 principles of agroecology, which were developed out of the high-level panel of experts of the Committee on World Food Security, really outlines and articulate the importance of soil in making sure that we keep it healthy and say, as this is an articulation of how fully aligned those 13 principles of agroecology are, as agreed upon by both state and non-state actors within the CFS process, and the 10 elements of agroecology, which was approved by 197 member states of FAO. So these two policies and these two frameworks are guiding the work of the coalition and should be guiding our collective work as we talk about agroecology, because we don't want to start from scratch. And so agroecology we're looking at it as um, uh, a three-legged stool, which is the first leg is really the science. That this is really a this is really an integrated and holistic science that builds not only on the biological sciences but also in social, economic, and political sciences. Because central to agroecology is really the issue around equity, around justice, around fairness. Unless we talk about the centrality of issues fairness and equity, then we're not really becoming transformative. So that is really important, particularly issues around power asymmetries. The second part is really around practice which indigenous communities, which local farmers and traditional farming practices have already been doing all along. So if if these communities are surviving, and we say that they are resilient, so why don't we amplify and support and build on the work that I've been doing? And lastly, a movement. Agroecology really started as a social movement in Latin America as a way of articulating the emancipation of a right for land ownership. Because without land, I mean, how can you imagine people who are feeding us do not even have access to the land that they till, right? So we will really look at agroecology as that threefold. And here, I mean, you are all experts in this. There are already several examples of agroecology from soil water system to crop cover cropping to crop rotation, and you name it. And these are the different agroecological practices that we could implement and support. So within the coalition, we're really looking at um, moving forward and pushing for agroecology in three and five different areas. One is facilitating the co-creation and exchange of knowledge. And by knowledge, we talk about both experimental knowledge from the scientific community and experiential knowledge from the local communities. I think it's really important to build on the convergence of knowledge and knowledge systems. The second is to foster increased investments on agroecology. We are increasingly seeing a momentum around agroecology. Countries and donors who have not been talking about agroecology in the last 3 or 5 years are increasingly coming up with their agroecology portfolios. But that is not enough. Increased investment does not necessarily mean new money. We need to mobilize and tap existing resources that are already there. How do we, and we should collectively push for realigning and repurposing or redirecting subsidies and other agricultural support toward agroecology and other truly and deeply regenerative approaches. Um, Advocating for and amplifying supported policy for agroecology. We are seeing countries across the world carrying out, establishing, and implementing their national agroecology strategies. We're seeing this momentum, a political momentum. Never we have seen that from the very beginning. That the increasing uptake of national governments developing their agroecology strategies. We've heard it in the opening of the Food System Summit. Countries like Liberia, like Ghana, Uganda mentioned agroecology, and even the UN Secretary General mentioned agroecology as an important pathway to achieve food system transformation. So really need to amplify those policies and push and support those that are supportive of agroecology. What is really market pathways? Let's face it, climate, biodiversity is good, but ultimately farmers need to earn decent income out of farming. Otherwise, we won't see youth, young people, pursuing farming, considering agriculture. And we're talking about future food. How can I feed us when people who are in agriculture are leading their farms, leading their fields, and looking at agriculture as something that is backward? We really need to change the narrative. And one way of doing that is building and promoting equitable market pathways around agroecology, thinking about existing mechanisms, public procurement, as an example, thinking about ways that are allowing us to identify and recognize products that are produced agroecologically. How can we learn from organic movement, from slow food movement, through the implementation of participatory guarantee systems that will allow us to develop trust-based approach to developing and supporting agroecology markets. And that's also one way of linking farmers to consumers, creating and supporting local and territorial markets, where we could also see markets, not just a space for for economics, but also the social function of market, where we see consumers and producers having that social interactions, where they discuss issues from local politics to gossip and to how things are evolving within their community. We're slowly losing that social dimension of markets, and by building territorial markets, this is one way of really sustaining and scaling agroecology. And lastly, within the coalition, we see our role really as amplificator of the work of our members. We are there to amplify, not to substitute to what members are doing. And it's really important to build on what others are doing. So the role of the coalition is really to support, engage, and strengthen the work of our members. And here is just um, uh, a, a diagram of how the coalition is established. We have a steering committee, we have working groups that is composed of different stakeholders and different regions. And currently we have around 50 member states of the coalition, 3 regional commissions, some sub-national agencies, and more than 360 organizations, from research to philanthropy to indigenous peoples, to SMEs and producers organizations. And so this is what we've been saying now: a growing space for agroecology, a growing talk and the centering of food systems, thinking around transformation, around multidimensionality, around agroecology funding on the rise, around the finance, the need to reorganize financing, but in the context also of competing agricultural models. We are underutilizing market opportunities, and we are also underutilizing traditional crops. So this is really an important element of agroecology. And then recognizing the catalytic role of frontline food system actors, from indigenous people to youth to farmer communities, fisher folk, etc. And then lastly, as I've said, we really build on this momentum of growing policies, emphasis on national policies. We are in the UN Food System Summit right now, and it's incumbent upon us to really push our governments to collectively take up the agroecology as one of those pathways to really support and sustain a truly transformative food systems.